Who's quitting their jobs, right? This is one of the main narratives that we're seeing in the media. In fact, the New York Times just got owned on this thing. They had an article in the last couple of days where they did a thoughtful conversation with 6 people who quit their jobs instead of getting a COVID vaccine. And it turns out that one of them, who is represented in the article as just like kind of a normal person who sincerely and heartfelt has concerns and is worried. Turns out this woman was just a screaming anti-vax activist, out there threatening people. And I mean, she was a total nutcase. And the New York Times didn't figure that out, didn't know that. They interviewed like 6 people as if they represent, 6 million people? No, they represent maybe 6,000 people. I mean, this is a very, very small percentage of people who are quitting their jobs. But they're getting all this publicity because, it plays into the Republican narrative that people are unhappy with how Biden is handling things. But where are they quitting their jobs? This is the fascinating thing. Alyssa Fowers and Eli Rosenberg did a deep dive in the Washington Post on this. And they report, and I'm quoting from the Washington Post, Kentucky, Idaho, South Dakota, and Iowa reported the highest increases in the rate of workers who quit their jobs in August. In addition to Georgia, which had the largest increase in quitters, with 35,000 people leaving their jobs in Georgia. So the question then becomes, why are people quitting their jobs in these rural states? I mean, if it's service jobs like being, working in a restaurant or something where you might be exposed to COVID, I get it. But those are mostly in big cities. Why in Idaho? Why in Kentucky are people quitting their jobs? Why in South Dakota and Iowa are people quitting their jobs? Georgia, Georgia could be skewed because it's got Atlanta, but it seems like it's in rural areas. Well, here's the clue that they lay out in this piece in the Washington Post. This is from Fowers and Rosenberg, quote, employees quit or were hired at rates matching or exceeding the national average in the 10 states with the highest rates of new COVID infections that month. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Those 10 states had, on the one hand, the highest rates of COVID infections. Keep in mind, we have the highest rates of COVID infections in the entire developed world. Nobody's even close. We have the highest rates of death and the highest rates of infection. We are 4% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's COVID infections. Because Donald Trump pushed people into COVID during the last 6 months of his presidency because he hoped that would get people back to work and it would get people back to shopping so the economy would recover so that he could win re-election. It's really very simple. And he has as much as come out and said this, as have numerous people who surrounded him. This is not a secret. This is not a conspiracy theory. He pushed people into COVID, and thus we end up with a quarter of the world's COVID infections being 4% of the world's population. We got the worst case of COVID in the world right now, and it's continuing in these red states. So the highest rate of COVID infection in these 10 states turns out to be exactly the same 10 states where you have the highest rate of people quitting their jobs. Now, 2 correlations become immediately obvious to me. The first is some people are quitting their jobs because they're afraid of getting COVID. I mean, if you're working at a supermarket checkout, station, and 5 or 10 or 20 or 30% of the people coming by refuse to wear masks and they're coughing all over you, and you're doing this for $13 an hour, or $10 an hour, or $7.25 an hour in some of these states, what do you say? You say, I'm out of here. I will sit this out. I'll go live with my parents or my best friend until COVID passes and I feel safe going back to work. That's one obvious answer. By the way, these are all right-to-work states. The right-to-work for less laws that say that basically you have no union protections in this state. So these workers have no protections. They've got no one they can turn to help remedy their unsafe conditions. They have no collective bargaining power. There's a great deep dive on this over at Daily Kos today by Dartigan in the community section that kind of ties these things together. In Missouri, a group of businesses, this is from the Washington Post, still frustrated by labor shortages more than 3 months after the state cut off the $300 a week federal jobless checks paid for billboards in Springfield to say, get off your butt, get to work. The state has seen no growth in its workforce since ending emergency benefits. See, this was the story that Republicans came up with initially. Oh, well, people are quitting their jobs because they're making $300 a month on unemployment. So the unemployment benefits ran out at the end of September, at the end of last month, but over a dozen Republican-controlled states cut those unemployment benefits in June, July, or August because they thought, oh, this is why people are refusing to go to work. So they cut their benefits. And guess what? It didn't change the numbers even a fraction of a percent. It's that people were afraid. That's one answer. The other answer, the other possible answer to why in these particular red states that are having really serious problems with COVID running amok, infecting people like crazy, because the states don't have mask mandates, they don't have vaccine mandates. In fact, in many cases, they have laws against even allowing towns in those states from having their own local municipal mask mandates. The other reason has to do with what COVID does to you. And I think that might be a big correlation, too. I'll tell you about that right after this break with our geeky science.